It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Welcome to RealAg Radio. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, on this August 30th, if you can believe it. So glad to be here. Thanks for joining me here on Rural Radio Channel 147. It is Wednesday. Wednesday, we seem to talk about markets, and you know what? I can do it. Markets are not my favorite thing. I'm going to be completely honest, and probably by now you already know that, but there are some fascinating things happening, and we can't forget just how important it is to know what is happening with the crop, what's happening globally, what's happening with supply and demand. So on today's show, I've got not one, but two market pieces, if you can believe it. So we're going to hear from Brian Comeault. He's out of Winnipeg with FBN. We're going to talk about, so yesterday, Statistics Canada did put out its updated production figures for the Canadian crop. So we will go through that, see if there's any surprises, see where we're at. And then Ted Seifried is going to join me. He's with Zaner Ag Hedge. He's going to join me to talk about the U.S. corn and soybean crop. Of course, we had the Pro Farmer Tour last week. He was on it, and if you follow him, you'll know that it was incredibly hot, and I'll get his perspective on where he thinks these crops end up. But before we get to that, really great conversation. So Brunel Sabourin, if you watched Monday's episode of The Agronomist, he was on to talk about when wheat needs N. But he also is doing this really cool thing called 30 videos in 30 days. And when I saw this, I just knew I had to ask him and have him on the show and talk about what the heck is this 30 videos in 30 days? Why did he decide to do that? So he is going to join me here just after the first break, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about. So super cool. And then, of course, I'll at the end of the show, probably not going to do full-on news because you know how much that's my favorite too, but I'm going to try. But we definitely have some cool stuff happening at a Farm Progress show that's happening in Decatur, Illinois this week. And so wanted to just touch base on a couple of the really cool things that are happening. If you're not watching it on social media, if you're not there are some pretty cool machines that are rolling out. And so we'll highlight some of them at the back end of the show when I've got a little bit of time and maybe a couple of the top news stories we're following for this week. Okay, as always, feedback, call that feedback line 1-855-776-6147 or zip me an email, lsmith@realagriculture.com. And with that, let's take a break and I'll be back with Brunel Sabourin right after this.
This is the sound of a farmer with a clear view of their fields and finances.
As is this.
And this.
Crop planning, profit reports, budget, cash flow statements, all laid out clearly with Ag Expert.
To view from inside the combine or in the field, projecting what's next.
Get valuable perspective anywhere you are. Ag Expert, farm management software built for Canadian farms. Visit agexpert.ca to get started today.
What were the issues in your fields this year? Did you do a soil sample? What is your soil sample telling you about some of the nutrient issues that you might be having going into next year? What herbicides did you use? What residues you might be concerned about? What weed issues did you have? What crop residues did you have? How well do you know your fields?
Get the answers to all the questions you have about your pulse crop at the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com.
Introducing the all-new Xerion 12 Series tractor by Kloss. Redesigned from the ground up to redefine the high-capacity four-wheel drive market. With 653 max horsepower, industry-leading hydraulic flow, a silky smooth CVT, a powerful TerraTrack undercarriage, and a quiet, comfortable cab with 20% more legroom. More than just power. The all-new Xerion by Kloss.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Wednesday, August 30th. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and we are calling all Ontario soybean growers. Savita International invites you to join their Titans of Agronomy event tomorrow, August 31st, featuring Peter Johnson, Albert Tenuta, Horst Bonner, Greg Stewart, and commodity expert Bailey Eichinger. They will be in Woodstock tomorrow. Head to savita.com/events to register, or if you can't make it tomorrow, head over to Inkerman on September 7th. I will be there as well. Please pre-register at savita.com/events. All right, joining me now is Brunel Sabourin. He's co-founder and lead agronomist with Antera Agronomy out of Manitoba. And if you have been on any of the social media platforms lately, you have perhaps seen Brunel's face and seen his 30 videos in 30 days. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Brunel, welcome here.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
All right, Brunel. So, yeah, okay. So I'm not sure when I caught on that you were doing this, but I saw it and thought, what a great idea. So explain to me, what is your 30 videos in 30 days?
Basically, it's a challenge that I gave myself just to produce 30 short videos in 30 days. And the idea behind it is to see if I can get better at making these short videos, and it's more being more efficient in getting information out to my customers and prospects and anybody else who's willing to listen, I guess.
So I love that you chose this as a challenge to do it. I guess that one of my questions, which I think is a valid one, is, you're choosing video, you're choosing short form video, you're choosing social to share them. Why do you think that's such an important part of getting some of this information out there and finding your customers or potential customers and other people?
I think it's just the world that we live in and how we're moving right now. It's not necessarily the video format. It's more getting information out there, sharing information. I think everybody now, and the buying process has changed essentially from when I started my career 20, 30 years ago, actually 30 years ago, because I'm celebrating my 48th birthday today, but I guess I'm rambling on now.
Happy birthday, Brunel. Let's start with that. Pause. I had no idea. So happy birthday. All right. Yeah, good job. Okay, carrying on.
A theme of today's video, what today's video is going to be. So the buying process has changed, where people do a lot more shopping ahead of time before they commit to buying something. So we're finding that, and I think this goes across any industry, is people are showing up to buy something, they've already researched it. So it's key to have a lot of content online and a lot of information that potential customers can view and digest. So whether it's written form or video format, anything, everything, we find that there's a lot of customers that are walking in the door that they already know if they want to do business with you. So it's showing up at the top of the list, showing up as being, first in the industry, is really speeding up the process where they're not necessarily shopping around anymore. They're coming in and they already know what they want, how they want it, so on and so forth. So that was the idea behind trying to get more information out. I found myself always saying, I got to write about this, I have to write about that, but never getting down to actually doing it and sharing information through newsletters. So that's where we said, well, maybe a video format, just these quick short videos, is an easier way to get information out.
So I love this because you're not just sharing information and potentially information about products or services or technologies that potential clients could offer. You're also, selling you. You're advertising that you're the company that they should be working with, which is pretty cool. The second part is you say, maybe it's easier with video. Now, I would say video is pretty easy to digest. It's easy to share. It's quick. How challenging is it, though, to keep these videos concise and quick and still get a message across?
It's very challenging. I mean, when I started out the first few days or so, it's easy to get to 3 minutes recording a video. But if you want to, I think Twitter has a limit of about 1.5 minutes. A lot of these social media outlets usually like to have things 30 seconds to a minute to keep user interest. So it's been an exercise in learning to be more concise, learning to get the point across faster and leaving out some of the filler. So for that, it's been a lot of fun, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I just quickly, before we get into some of the topics that you cover, because there's some really great stuff in there, the hashtag, if you're interested in finding some of these, is 30, so the number 30, videos in 30, the number 30 days. And I've seen quite a few on Twitter or X. Where else will people be able to find them? Are you going to upload these to YouTube, or are they on TikTok? Where can people find them?
Right now, we've focused on primarily X, because that's where a lot of our customers are, but we also have them on our Facebook page and our Instagram account, but we will be adding them to YouTube as well as a series, and then we'll put them all in a playlist.
Cool. Okay. So what are the kinds of things you've covered? So I've caught not all of them, thanks algorithm, but if you actually search the hashtag, if you click on that hashtag, then you can of course see all of them in one place, which is great. But what are some of the topics you've covered, and what are some of the topics that have got some really good conversations going?
Well, we're on day 20. Today would be day 20, I think. So we've reached a milestone. But the topics are all timely agronomic information mostly. It's things that we see in the field, whether it's fertility issues, weed issues, crop issues. It's actually a really good recap of how the growing season has been and how, as we come into harvest here, what's happening in the field. So some of the stuff that's gone really viral, we had one post that blew everything out of the water on day 2. And so far we haven't been able to reproduce it, but it was a post talking about producers that hang their boom over the ditch and spray out the weeds. Mm-hmm. So that kills, usually we have like a lot of, the ditches are usually filled with perennial grasses, which aren't bad, but some producers that want to knock that grass back like to hang the boom over the ditch, but then if you kill the grass, it fills in with a bunch of nasty perennials and things like water hemp and palmer that we don't want.
Nature does not like bare soil. Bare soil will always fill, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that post alone, I think generated. I can't remember what the numbers were, but it was huge. It was shared by over 100 people, or just tremendous.
And was most of the, I mean, getting something to be shared and talked about, did you get any feedback of like, well, I do it because, and people defending it, or was it a lot of people sort of saying, yes, this is something that bothers me too? Was it sort of supportive of your angle on it?
Yes, for the most part, it has been supportive of the angle on it. Everybody, either they had never thought about that, or they were, I don't think anybody really opposed it other than spraying it more, but we're not going to, it's a problem that we're not going to spray our way out of, these nasty weeds and herbicide resistance. So that's not the solution by any means. It's just another tool in the toolbox. We've seen enough cases of these ditches where we saw 1 or 2 weeds on the field border last year. These ditches are now covered in these nasty weeds. So
absolutely,
it's definitely not a good thing. But I don't know if it's something that's just never talked about, or if it was an aha moment for a lot of people. But yeah, it's been shared all over North America. A lot of prominent people involved in weed science, a lot of agronomists that we know of and work closely with. It's been really positive. One thing with this series of videos that really surprised me too is a lot of people in the community that don't necessarily have ties to agriculture are all commenting about how they're watching the videos and learning about agriculture. So,
that's a really
an advocate.
Yeah, that's a really neat point, right? Is that this is obviously geared towards your customers or potential customers or other agronomists or people in the agriculture industry. But it's a good reminder that, once you put something on social, anybody can find it. Which means, yeah. Has that changed your messaging?
That would never expect that would be watching it have been watching it.
Yeah.
It's changed it to a certain extent.
Okay. How so?
Because it's not just trying to mix it up a bit. We've done a lot of posts of what we're finding in the field and what we think are hot button topics, but there's also a lot of posts that talk about different things or the lighter side of it, and we're going to try to work a little bit of humor into it. And all of it, I guess we only have 10 days left. We'll be continuing after for sure. But it's been a good exercise too in figuring out what's the best way to relay a message, what are the hot button topics. I'm looking forward to this winter and really diving into all the analytics on this information and being, okay, well, what resonates? How do we deliver it? What's the best way to do it?
And did you spend any money on equipment to sort of up the production value, or is this you and your phone and figuring out how to edit on the fly, or did you spend some time figuring out, what you might need to do this?
It's mostly been, it's all recorded on the phone. I do have an external microphone with not a windsock on it, but
we call them like lucky rabbit's feet. They get the little fuzzy thing on it. Yeah,
the fuzzy thing.
Yep.
The technical industry term.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So it's mostly been done with that. I do have a wireless mic. If it's really windy, that it just helps cut down on some of the wind noise. Or if on a windy day, I might not record. I'll record indoors. So there hasn't been a whole lot of, not any high-end stuff.
Yeah. It is the thing that...
there are a few recordings that I did with a picture-in-picture. Some of them were done on the phone, but some of them were also done through a website like Loom, which allows you to record your screen on your computer. So it records the screen of the computer, but also records the camera. So it shows you, it shows you as a bubble talking in the corner, but really the screen is what the focus is on in the video. So
see, Brunel, even
free to use.
Yeah, even your agronomists have to learn new technology every year, and so this is
for sure.
This is what you get to learn this year, is how to make videos, and away you go. But I mean, it is brilliant though, and thank you for the good sound, because I think all of us could name either videos or podcasts where they're probably great, but the sound is awful. So I love it. And it's
just a basic phone, the camera and the microphone, it's incredible what you can do with it.
Yep. It's pretty cool. I appreciate it. Okay. So a reminder for anyone who is interested in following Brunel, hashtag 30 videos in 30 days. And that's 330. Brunel and Terra Agronomy, what is your social media handle? Cause that's another way people can find you.
It would be Antera Ag.
Okay. And that's ANTARAAG.
Yeah.
All right. So if anyone is looking for it,
and then
check it out.
B Sabourin would be my personal account, but pretty much everything's done through Antera Ag account.
Right. Okay.
Or linked back to it.
Yeah. We will send people there. Let them know what you like, what you want to see more of, and a happy birthday to you. And happy 10 more days of this.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, all right. Okay, Brunel, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Right on.
We'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
Did you know that Pioneer now has a full lineup of Enlist E3 soybeans? Take a look at Pioneer brand Enlist E3 soybeans for the highest yield potential and for the best agronomic package and herbicide trait options. From the lab to the field, Pioneer brand Enlist E3 soybeans are the best in beans, period. Ask your local Pioneer representative about Enlist E3 beans.
You know, there's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup, weed control, field trial results, yield strategies, and so much more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF, Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest podcast today.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Pride Seeds, BASF, and Syngenta Canada.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio here on this Wednesday, August 30th. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and this segment is brought to you by Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer. Imitator stabilizer products claim dual protection, but do they actually deliver? Defend your UAN for nitrogen loss with Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. Offering superior above and below ground protection. See how others stack up at defendyourn.ca. All right, joining me now, Brian Comeault, market analyst with FBN. Welcome here, Brian.
Thanks for having me, Lyndsey.
All right, so StatsCan came out on Tuesday with its latest estimates. First blush, are you surprised at all?
No, I'm not surprised at all. I think there was some pretty big production cuts that were shown, year over year or even versus average on a lot of commodities. And I think the general theme, right, which I think everybody's been expecting, was crops are not as good as last year. They're, not as good as average, but they're better than they were in the 2021 drought year. Mm-hmm. So I think that is kind of the major theme that came across. I think there were some numbers that maybe surprised some people, but overall, I think 15 to 20% production cuts versus average is kind of what we're looking at overall.
Now, let's focus then in on. There's a few things to talk about, but canola for sure. There were definitely some changes in numbers beyond just production estimates. Walk me through that. Yeah,
so, again, I think the market was pretty comfortable with the fact that Statistics Canada had been underestimating particularly 2022's crop, I think was kind of the major theme. We kind of noticed through statistics that, there was more deliveries of canola than what, StatsCan had reported there being supplies of. So, we kind of knew intrinsically that there was more canola out there in farm bins than what was expected. So what StatsCan did, though, is they did add about 520,000 tons to last year's crop production, but they also added almost 500,000 tons, or 496,000, to the 2021 crop, which would have been the drought year. So there was some production amendments done to the drought year that probably were, not necessarily expected, or at least not to the size that they did amend it to.
Mm-hmm. So now we've been talking. So the canola number came in at 17.56. Where was that in line with where you were pegging it? Is that pretty much in line with what you thought, or are you one of the 16s or one of the 18s?
It was a few 100,000 tons higher than what we were probably thinking. There still is lots of harvest yet to go, and some of these estimates were done, early or late in July, right? So a lot of the dryness that has occurred in the last 3 weeks or so may not have been factored into the market. There's lots of pod filling and things like that would have needed to happen. So I suppose as far as like what we thought StatsCan would estimate, it probably came in around that area. They are calling for about a 15% reduction versus average. So maybe there's a little bit more to shave off that yet, would kind of be our bias depending on how the harvest goes. So we haven't seen a lot of harvest results yet, but the plant stands and the pods might have looked good at the end of July. The filling of the pods would be the concern after the data was taken by StatsCan.
Mm-hmm.
So now we might be a little bit more biased towards a downside revision on that, but I think that's pretty much what the market was expecting for StatsCan. I think just a couple 100,000 tons over what the average guess was, I think.
Does this change in any significant way your opinion on where some of these markets are headed? If we think wheat and canola, let's start there. As far as sort of the overall tone for these markets, does this report change anything for you?
No, I think until proven otherwise, I've kind of been in a more neutral to bullish opinion on canola. Canola made a high back in on the 19th of July. We saw a high in canola. It struggled to come back from that, even as the heat and the yield estimates have declined. I think a lot of that has to do with outside markets too. So we're seeing some influence from the soybean market. We're seeing some influence from the vegetable oil markets as a whole. Canola oil in a lot of the overseas markets was priced really high relative to the other oil seeds. So there's been some demand destruction on the canola oil side. And then we have some even further outside market matters like, the Chinese economy and inflationary concerns and, U.S. central bank actions and things like that have been kind of keeping a lid on commodities as a whole as well. And I think canola gets sucked into that as well. So at this point, I think the high 800s on the future side is probably where we'll trade for a little while. If it does start to creep up above that, up above 850 or 860, that might give us some reason to think that this market has some more fire underneath it. But right now, it definitely seems to be more in consolidation mode in the high 8 or in the low to mid 800s.
And then what about wheat?
Wheat is, generally speaking, wheat seasonally hits some lows at this point in the year. We just came out of the U.S. harvest pressure. We've seen European harvest pressure. We're about to get into the Canadian harvest, but that doesn't really affect markets too much. We did see a positive response on Minneapolis early after the Statistics Canada report. I think it was spring wheat particularly had they were about 1 million tons off. The average trade guess was about 1 million tons off of what was actually printed. So there was a bit of a bullish tilt towards the spring wheat. It is still trading near lows, but it definitely gained some value versus the winter classes today. So there was, a little bit of spreading happening in between the spring wheat and the winter wheats. But seasonally, we generally see lows in futures at around this time or within the next couple of weeks. So even though the fundamentals are a little bit bearish globally for wheat, I think that, this is a supportive Statistics Canada report for spring wheat.
Now, I'll let you pick your favorite, oats or barley, because I want to ask about one of them. But not everybody follows the oat market. Not everybody loves barley. Which one is most interesting to you right now of those two markets?
I think oats is most interesting to me at this time. We've refrained from making any selling recommendations on oats so far this year, and that seemed like a really bad decision up until a couple of weeks ago. And it's now starting to take off. I think, there's a lot of concerns around Statistics Canada's acreage assessment on oats. There might be an opportunity that they've reported it too high. Maybe that comes out in some of the subsequent Statistics Canada reports in the next couple of weeks. But yields are also, I think, under threat. We saw, what did they print on oats today? 2.4. Even in the drought year, we still got, 2.9 million tons of oats, right? So from a purely production standpoint, oats is very tight now in Canada, and the demand is not as elastic for oats, particularly into the human consumption market. So I think there's lots of excitement going on in oats right now. It broke about $5 on the futures market today, and there could be some further upside there as well. Although, at some point, we will see the bullishness in this market get priced in, and we might see it, consolidate or back off a little bit. That might give the opportunity for farmers to hedge some more of their crop into this season.
I find oats interesting too, so I'm so glad you picked that one. We'll end on maybe the pulses. Certainly hearing some rumblings from India as far as production going, but we also know that our pulse areas have been pretty hard hit by drought this year. What is, generally speaking, obviously there's differences between pulse types, but generally speaking, how do we feel about the pulse market?
I think the pulses are leaning towards bullish as well. That we're talking about production numbers that are, equal to or even below that of 2021. I'm particularly looking at, lentils came in below 2021's number. So did peas, actually. So both of those are going to be tight going into this market. Peas may have been a little bit looser of an S&D coming into this market. Carryout, I saw some private estimates of carryout at around 500,000 tons or something like that, which is relatively comfortable for peas. So there's a little bit more of a cushion, particularly if there's no demand. And so I think if you think about the demand shocks that could come into the market there, we need China to continue buying. And if their economy is suffering and their buying of feed grains is lower, that might have a bit of a weight on peas. India obviously is having issues with their production. They haven't imported a lot of Canadian pulses of any size for a long time. Is this the year that changes? I suppose there could be some opportunity there. Even a couple of containers or a couple of vessels would probably make a difference and tighten up the S&D. So overall, I think the pulses should be well supported. I think it turns now into a demand story of whether or not the market wants what we have to offer, as little as it is.
Mm-hmm. All right. Fascinating stuff. Isn't it fun when the markets are interesting? Let's go with that. It keeps me interested.
I love waking up every morning and not knowing what's going to happen. And that stresses a lot of people out, but that's what gets me up in the morning. So
see, there you go. You are in the right role. There you go. All right, Brian, thanks so much for joining me on the show today. This is fascinating stuff. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Lyndsey.
All right. We'll be back with more Real Ag Radio right after this.
Does your N stabilizer contain an active ingredient load high enough to be agronomically effective? If not, it could be costing you time and money. If you're putting down a nitrogen stabilizer, put your trust in Koch Agronomic Services. Solutions like Super U, Tribune, and Anvil. Each delivers high active ingredient concentrations that low-rate products just can't match. Compare how imitator products stack up to agronomically effective solutions at defendyourn.ca.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Sean Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on SiriusXM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today. Hey, welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this hump day. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and this segment is brought to you by Granubor from US Borax. Ask for it by name. All right, joining me now on the line, it's Ted the Spread. Ted Seifried, Chief Market Strategist with Zaner Ag Hedge. Welcome here, Ted.
Hey, thanks for having me, Lyndsey. How you doing?
Well, probably better than you. Have you cured your sunburn and or extreme water exhaustion from last week?
You know, I think finally yesterday was the day that I turned the corner, but
Okay.
It took a few days.
Yeah. And if no one knows what we're talking about, of course, then you've been living under a rock. But more importantly, it was the Pro Farmer Tour last week. You were on one of the legs, and I was following along, and I don't know that there was one picture where it didn't look dastardly hot. So what was that tour like?
Yeah, this was my ninth year, and it was probably the most difficult as far as weather was concerned. It was hot. I feel for the guys that were out, guys and girls that were out on the west, though. I think they had it a little bit worse than us. But I do remember Wednesday mid-afternoon kicking around in southeastern Iowa in a heat index of 122 degrees. And when you're doing these things, Lyndsey, I mostly do corn. Corn's, I think, the harder one to do, and more often than not, I'm one of the senior scouts in the car that I'm in, which I'm also not 63. So that combination means Ted's going into corn.
Yes, that's right.
And so, yep. And so that's long sleeves and long pants and boots and a hat and sunglasses and a lot of times a hood, depending on how dried down that cornfield is, because corn leaves are sharp sharp normally, but you have a dry cornfield and you have razor blades that are attacking you as you're trying to go in through this cornfield, and you have to go fairly deep in because we're not trying to count end rows. So that's right. Yeah. Yeah. It's hot, and you're fully, probably wearing way too much clothes for that sort of temperature. And it was kind of miserable at points, but it's 1 week a year that, I sacrifice that week. It's also, my birthday happens to fall on that week every year. My kid's first day of school falls on that week every year. And so there's a lot of sacrifices to go out and do this, but it's also one of my most important weeks of the year. I need to go out and see what we actually have out there. I do some of that throughout the year, but I'm kicking around in northern Illinois, good portion of Iowa, southern Wisconsin. This is a way for me to see a much broader picture in a really short period of time, cover a lot of ground, hang out with some friends that I've had for a while, meet some new people. It's a very rewarding week for me.
Yeah, it's so, and hats off to all of you, because you're right. I think there were over 100 people between all the legs that were scouting. It's a lot of miles in a short amount of time. And as you said, like 122 degrees is almost like, we're almost talking about slow roasting a pork shoulder at this point at that temp. So like it's not that far off. Yeah. You were the pork shoulder. Yeah. Yeah.
And especially once you get in the cornfield, yes, there's shade, but it's like an oven in there because there's no breeze at all.
There's none whatsoever. Now, okay, but that does bring us, we are going to talk markets. And of course, we had the Pro Farmer numbers, their official numbers come out Friday. But one of the sort of caveats to all of this is, how long that incredibly hot weather continues, what impact that could have on this crop. So based on that week, you've had some time to think about it. What are your thoughts on this incredible heat's impact on that final number?
Yeah, and so first of all, just so everybody knows, I think it sounds like but the pro farmer numbers that we got Friday afternoon, that is their interpretation of the data that we collected. That is not the raw data numbers. Like you said, they incorporate what the forecast is going forward. And with their proprietary numbers, they're trying to guess what the USDA's final yield is going to be really in the January report. They're not trying to guess the September or October report. They're trying to guess the final USDA yield. In my opinion, and I'm allowed to have a different opinion than Pro Farmer, and I certainly do because, you know, as you said, I run Zaner Ag Hedge, so we produce our number as well. In my opinion, I think they were a little bit too aggressive on cutting soybean yields in particular. I think, you know, weather is a concern, and obviously the market had responded to that Sunday night into Monday. Weather is a concern, and it is kind of reminiscent of the hot and dry finish that we had last year, but the timing of it is different. And what I mean by that is, you know, we had a really good first 2 to 3 weeks of August, and then it got warm and dry, and that has sort of carried over. It looks like it's going to carry over into September. This 3-day holiday weekend is going to be rather warm in a lot of places. So this is a pattern that seems to be entrenched for the time being. I am a little worried that over the 3-day holiday weekend that forecast might change. It just has a tendency to do that. But if it doesn't, you know, there's a wild debate happening on social media and between analysts about whether the timing of this is extremely detrimental to corn and soybeans or not. We saw crop conditions on Monday afternoon only decline 2 points in corn, 1 point in soybean. That was a lot less than what the trade was expecting. And that has caused kind of a bit of a hangover for the markets here Tuesday and Wednesday as we are struggling to hold any sort of or gain any sort of weather premium. So some people think that this is too late to really have a major impact on the crop. Others think that this is going to have a disastrous impact on the crop. And I think we're not exactly sure. This time last year, because the heat and the dryness started earlier, there was a pretty much unanimous feeling that, okay, this crop is going backwards, and it's going backwards in a hurry. This time you have a very mixed bag of what people think. I don't think there's anybody thinking this crop is getting bigger right now. But like myself, you know, I look at the soybean crops that we saw, and you know, something that you heard a lot from Pro Farmer when they were releasing their numbers was that there's a lot of flat pods out there. And my answer to that would be, or my response to that would be, yes, there are in certain areas. And for me, that was Ohio and eastern Indiana, but those areas got a lot of rain mid to late week last week. And then the other areas would have been Nebraska and South Dakota, and a lot of those dryland Nebraska fields that we were talking about, flat pods, they got some rain. So I'm wondering if really that's not going to be quite as bad as what we had thought when we were going through those fields. And also, you know, when I look at what we had in northern Illinois and in eastern Iowa, they were much further along. I'd say those pods were 2/3 to 3/4 of the way full, and they were sitting on some really dark, lush green plants. And we know that soybean plants are going to sacrifice all of their moisture to go straight into pods. That's what they do. So I wonder if maybe this isn't going to be a complete disaster, but I don't know. You know, we really don't know how we're going to finish up here for the next 3 weeks.
All right. So thinking about that, of course, so that is my one question. In watching, you know, the tour last week and following on social media, certainly saw that quite a bit of the crop, not soybeans, but the corn crop, quite far along. I mean, it was quite mature in some areas. So how does that play into this number?
Yeah, and so that's the thing. It's similar to soybeans. You know, the areas that we were seeing immature corn, well, not terribly immature, but the less, relatively speaking, mature corn was in, again, Ohio and eastern Indiana, and those areas got some really good rains. And I think now they could actually use some heat to finish off. But, you know, a lot of that Iowa corn, that western Illinois corn, you know, the areas that we're most worried about from a temperature standpoint, you know, a lot of that's really far along, a lot more mature than I think we'd like to really think at this time of the year. You know, everything we're looking at was like mid to late dent. So yes, there is potential to lose test weight. I mean, there is some downside there, but it's not a tremendous amount of downside like it would be if this was mid to late July or even early August. So For me personally, I saw a lot of dropping ears, or what I'm going to say, drooping ears. I don't feel like those ears are going to give up and fall to the ground. It's just we're that far along in this growing season that, this is the time for that to sort of happen. And again, it's happening earlier than we thought. I don't know what exactly got us to that point. It was a very strange combination of hot and dry to start the year, then really good weather in July and August for the most part, and then back to hot and dry. We raced to maturity, I think, faster than expected. But I think that corn crop, for the most part, is out there. It's not what we thought trendline yield or what the USDA thought trendline yield would be, but I do think it's somewhere between a 171 and a 174. So I kind of agree with the pro farmer number.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, we're in Ontario. Here in Ontario, we have the opposite problem. We have corn that we're like, oh my, could you please start maturing? So we'll see how that goes, but we're a blip. Now, just quickly before we sort of wrap up here on the soybean number. So you, of course, saying maybe not as negative on the soybean crop as perhaps pro farmer. Do you have a number? Where does yours sit?
Yeah, and so I understand why they put that number out based on the forecast. And they've had years in the past where they've put out a number and then the forecast wasn't favorable and it ended up being a lot lower. And I think they really kind of took that very carefully this year. Again, personally, from what I saw, I'm going to put the number at a 51.4. That's the number that I'm working with right now. It's just slightly higher than where the USDA is, but it's quite a bit higher than where Pro Farmer is. Mm-hmm. And that's based on the idea that I think the weather might end up being just slightly better than what we're concerned about. But even if it's not, like I said, the areas that really needed the flat pot areas, I think a lot of those are going to play a little bit of catch up here. Did get some rain. But the areas that will probably stay hot and dry, again, those big plants, I think, are going to sacrifice all of that moisture. And I think we're going to be a little bit surprised with how well they do.
So you did mention earlier in the week, saw some market movement on this. Have things sort of petered out? What's the next big thing we're watching for?
Yeah, so, what will start here after this 3-day holiday weekend is the production conversation will start to fade. And then we'll talk more about the demand side of the equation, which for corn is a really not a fun conversation to have. Soybeans are better. We've been seeing these daily wire export sales happening, which we normally would this time of year. It's not been anything shocking. It's been rather normal. Normal is good in this scenario. But yeah, pretty soon we're going to start talking about South American planting, how they've gotten actually some pretty decent rains going in to planting, which is kind of rare for them in their dry season. It also means they're probably going to get off to a fast pace of planting unless it gets absolutely too wet. A lot of times those guys will wait until it rains before they start planting. They do not subscribe to the old saying of plant in dust, your bins will bust. They would rather plant into a bit of moisture, which they've actually got right now. So we'll start talking about that. We certainly should be talking about how South America continues to set, or how Brazil continues to set record monthly shipments for both corn and soybeans. And so that should be a concern for us. So once we've got this North American production kind of ironed out a bit more, then the demand side of the equation starts. That'll be a conversation. And then a little bit past that, we'll start talking South American weather.
All right. That's what we'll keep our eyes on. All right. At the Ted Spread is your Twitter handle. Sorry, X. I'm getting used to this. See, I'm getting used. Yeah, right. Okay. Ted, thanks so much for Zaner Ag Hedge. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Lyndsey. Thanks for having me. Lots of fun.
All righty. Okay, we'll be back after this with more Real Ag Radio.
This year might bankrupt us. If I lose the farm, I'm letting down generations of my family. Why am I the only one who can't handle it? Maybe the farm would be better off without me. Hello?
Hey, I was just thinking about you and thought I'd say hi. I know it's been a hard season, and I wanted to see how you're holding up.
We might feel alone, but we're all in this together. Visit domore.ag for mental health supports tailored for the agriculture community.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and yes, it is Wednesday, August 30th. We are counting down the moments here until we kick into September. This segment is brought to you by the all-new Class Xerion 12 series, delivering unmatched power and performance in the big 4x4 tractor range. Discover more at claas.com. Okay, I'm going to use that inspiration, that sponsorship, to chat about what is happening this week, of course, at Farm Progress Show. So yes, it is late August, and that means it's time to head down to Farm Progress Show. There are, of course, several things turning heads this week. Our own Brad Martin is down there getting us some photos and doing all sorts of meetings. But one of the big ones, of course, is Case IH rolled out the Steiger 715 quad track. Oh, yes, that 715 stands for horsepower, offering 778 peak horsepower on this engine. It is the most powerful Case IH Steiger tractor to date. So we do have a story up on RealAgriculture.com. You can get a look at the specs there. Just some really cool stuff happening. Okay, also turning heads is a concept machine. So this is a machine that making its debut in Decatur, Illinois. It's not really a tractor. It's called the Nexat unit. And it's originally from the Netherlands, and they're bringing it over here to North America, and it has a power unit with attachments, and the operating unit is 50 feet across, but it can be transported for that 12-foot width. Now, what's super interesting about this thing, and you've got to see pictures of it, so please head to realagriculture.com. We've got some images there. We've got some of the discussion on what this thing is, but the idea is that it can be tracked or wheeled, but that although it's quite wide, only 5% of the soil actually sees traffic. So the idea here is doing a lot of work with not a lot of compaction. So definitely seeing many people checking it out at the show. Really quite bizarre looking. It's hard to even describe how different it looks from, say, a tractor or combine, but it does some pretty cool things like combine a crop. And currently, right now, as on display, it is being powered by two 550 horsepower diesel engines, one on each end to balance out the weight. So, just mentioning the Steiger tractor at 715, this machine has two 550 horsepower engines. So super cool. Check it out. Definitely really neat. Now, the other thing that we did see roll out at Farm Progress was New Holland. Of course, this isn't entirely new. We knew they were going to be coming out with a line of electric tractors, but this is sort of our first view of really this whole lineup. So we are getting our first look at what will come out in this range. The T4 electric power has four-wheel drive, or does come with four-wheel drive. It has 110 kilowatt hour maximum energy storage. And it provides 74 horsepower and 65 horsepower PTO power. So if you're curious about how electric tractors are going to make their way into the farming sphere, this is at least New Holland's entry into it, and certainly getting a lot of attention at the show. Now, of course, for everyone who bleeds green, don't worry. I'm sure there's going to be all sorts of really neat stuff coming from John Deere as well, and just general coverage of the show. So keep watch. Bern Tobin and Kara Oosterhuis are doing their best to cover the show, and we'll have plenty to come from Farm Progress coming up in the coming week for sure, and maybe a little bit after that. So if you didn't have a chance to go down to the show, by all means, you can check out realagriculture.com. We'll have some of the videos up on our YouTube channel as well, so check that out if you like. All right, moving on. There's a couple of other things happening this week that I'll touch on briefly here. We'll probably dig into far more on the issues panel on Friday. But the Senate Committee on agriculture and forestry is actually touring Western Canada right now and making all sorts of stops, which is kind of cool. So checking out some agriculture technology, checking out a few things happening out west. We're going to touch base and maybe if we can try and learn about where they stopped and some thoughts on that. So stay tuned later in the week or early next. We'll be talking about that as well. But certainly cool to see the senators touring around learning about agriculture. That's always kind of cool. Also on the radar this week, we did hear that Trade Minister Mary Ng and Agriculture Minister Lawrence MacAulay have announced that Canada will participate as a third party in the dispute settlement proceedings initiated by the U.S. against Mexico. I know we talked about that last week, but we did hear this week from CAFTA, so that's the Canadian Agri-Food Trade Alliance, and they've come out basically in support of this and saying that this is incredibly important. President Dan Darling says that this agreement has been very beneficial to the health of the ag sectors in our respective countries, while ensuring the continued availability of sustainably grown and produced agriculture and agri-food products across our continental trading bloc. So this needs to continue, Darling says, and all parties to CUSMA have an obligation to ensure that regulatory measures are developed and implemented in accordance with the sanitary and phytosanitary obligations of the agreement. So definitely going to be tracking what's going on here because it does appear that Mexico banning or trying to implement a ban on genetically modified corn essentially contravenes CUSMA or the USMCA, however you want to call it, and that of course creates issues for Canada and the US, in shipping to Mexico. Now Canada perhaps doesn't send a ton of corn to Mexico, but we sure as heck send a lot of canola, and that canola largely also genetically modified. So Canada is certainly watching this, and we are hearing certainly from our government that they are supporting the US in having this trade dispute brought up with Mexico. So we will continue to follow that. But CAFTA, of course, saying that this is incredibly important and needs to be prioritized and worked through. Lastly, and just quickly wanted to just shout out now. So Monday is a holiday. So it is Labor Day on Monday. There won't be a show Monday. We'll have a replay. But on Tuesday's show, of course, yes, it's Tuesdays with Lyndsey. We're going to have an Agronomic Tuesday. But one of the things I wanted to point out, especially because time is of the essence here, I will likely have Peter Wheatbeat Johnson on to talk about broadcasting wheat into soybeans. But if you're curious, and especially because this soybean crop, as we talked with Ted earlier today, because this soybean crop here in Ontario seems to be grass green as we head into September and just not roaring to the finish line like we might hope, we are looking at a potential of a very late seeded winter wheat crop. And we know that one of the most important things to a bin buster of a wheat crop is planting date, and ideal is good, which ideal is usually early. So for those of you thinking about potentially broadcasting wheat into soybeans because it's looking like a very late harvest, head on over either to RealAgriculture.com or to our YouTube channel. Wheat Pete has already got a video up there talking about what to consider when broadcasting into standing soybeans. And there are a few key things you have to keep in mind to avoid the slugs, because the slugs are not your friend. And also, of course, make sure you get a good catch on that. How early is too early? How late is too late? And whether or not we need to be concerned about treated seed into soybeans. These are all very important points, and Pete covers them all. So head on over to YouTube. Just honestly, Google search Wheat School. I guess I can say Google, and you'll find it there. And subscribe while you're there. You'll never miss anything from Real Agriculture. Okay, that about does it for me on this Wednesday, August 30th. Thanks so much for joining me. Hope you enjoyed the show. As always, send me your feedback, 1-855-776-6147, or zip me an email, lsmith@realagriculture.com, or find us across social media at Real Agriculture. I'm back tomorrow with the Farmer Rapid Fire. Super pumped. Probably my favorite day of the week. All right. Stay safe. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.